Imagine being a horror fan in the 80s. You hear the news that a TV show called Friday the 13th will be coming out on October 3rd, 1987. And so, you clear out your schedule. You're super excited to watch Jason Voorhees on the TV screen doing Jason Voorhees things. You want to know more about Camp Crystal Lake, the hockey mask lore, and of course, watch Voorhees get some gnarly kills. So when the time comes, you're seated, the show starts, and instead of seeing our boy on screen, you see two cousins inheriting this cursed antique shop from a man who's made a deal with the devil. Everything that got you so hyped is nowhere to be seen. And the rage you feel right now, imagine how we must have felt back then. And we didn't even have X or Reddit to go to complain about it.
As beautiful as you.
Yeah, guys, today I'll let you know the story of one of the most misleading titles in television history. A show that basically borrowed the name of a genre-defining horror moment and turned it into something that was completely unrelated to it. And somehow, the show actually managed to have a cult following, go on for 3 seasons, only to get canceled mid-season. So if you're intrigued like I am, then join me as we delve deep into the curious case of the Friday the 13th TV series. Let's go back to 1986. By this point, Friday the 13th film series was a household name, and Hollywood had been pumping out those films, grasping at any and every straw that they could to keep milking the cash cow. By this time, the 6th film had come out, and it had earned about $2 million less than the 5th film at the US box office. So Paramount wasn't very sure about how they were going to proceed with this franchise. They wanted to move Freddy vs. Jason, the highly anticipated movie, into production, but every attempt at that failed. So at this point, everyone knew that their product was kind of simmering down. And if you know Hollywood, you know that they would never, ever want their cash cow to run dry. So they decided to just take a detour into the television syndicate. So Paramount started to show a lot of interest in moving 2 of their most successful commodities to the small screen, Star Trek and Friday the 13th. Yeah, you can guess how hyped we were. And it makes so much sense why they chose these 2 brands. Both titles were familiar to the public, and there's so much love for the characters. So if they move forward with it, there would be, theoretically, a level of interest, even though there was a risk of attracting controversy with Friday the 13th. Still, if a little controversy would get everyone hyped for Jason again, so be it, you know? So Paramount Television's Mel Harris contacted Frank Mancuso Jr. and decided they were going to transport Friday the 13th's brand to the small screen. Now, in this talking period, Harris mentioned to Mancuso Jr. that there should be no direct correlation with the movie franchise or Voorhees or Camp Crystal Lake. Yeah, if you're scratching your head at this, trust me, so am I. It doesn't make even the remotest sense why the person commissioning the show had already decided that it shouldn't have anything to do with the films. So basically from the get-go, it was basically 3 raccoons dressed in a trench coat going, "Nah, boss, we're not raccoons, we're men." And Mancuso Jr. knew that this would disappoint the fans and the ratings would suffer. He was very hesitant about creating a show that would basically irate and confuse horror fans. So, bless his heart, he approached the production studio and suggested they call it the 13th Hour instead. You know, you still have the spooky wooky feeling, but you're not pretending to be something you're not. But Harris said the producers were adamant. They wanted to get the sweet hype and money of using a recognizable brand name, so they insisted that Friday the 13th remain the title. So Mancuso Jr. did a focus group survey, which showed that the majority of the viewers were put off by the show being titled Friday the 13th, but having nothing to do with the franchise. So he went to the supervisors with the test results, and then nothing. He was unsuccessful. I mean, think about it from his perspective. The man already knew his crowd. He knew what he was doing would probably mess up the whole thing and piss off everyone in the long run. But Paramount's word is the last word on the matter. As a result, we have a show that is wearing the identity of a franchise that had nothing to do with. Speaking of which, let's talk about the show premise in detail. I told you guys about the basic premise. It was created by Larry B. Williams, the writer. We have a man who owns this antique store. He's struggling to make a profit because of a tough crowd and all, and decides to sell his soul to evil in return for success. And as a result of his deal with the devil, he gets massive wealth, but that eventually costs him his life. After his death, the store is taken over by his niece and her cousin, and these two start selling off the items in the store without knowing this dark past. And sure enough, before they know it, they've already unleashed this great evil upon the world. So now Mickey, played by Lucy Robbie, and Ryan, played by John D. LeMay, team up with their uncle's friend, Jack Marshak, played by Chris Wiggins, to get the objects back. every episode, we see a new cursed object, a new owner, and new drama surrounding the object that the three protagonists have to bring back to the vault. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. This kind of setup was really fresh in that era. You see, in the late 1980s, The Twilight Zone had just been revived, and Tales from the Dark Side was running. So the horror anthology series was a thing. However, each of these shows didn't have the emotional grounding that Friday the 13th had to provide, with the same three main characters chasing down objects week after week. There was an emotional gravitas to it. The cast carried the whole thing too. We watched Ryan go from this wide-eyed heir to someone who understood just how heavy their work was. Mickey literally sacrificed her relationships to stay on the hunt. And Jack? Well, he was the knowledgeable guy of the team and was basically the tether that kept everyone together. I personally really loved the show because Mickey was one of the stronger female leads on TV back in the day. She was smart, capable, resourceful, and she actually had character development. Plus, the objects that they were chasing were so mundane. They were like a glove or a sewing machine that wouldn't look out of place in a normal house. So the horror was creeping and it required characters who were always on their toes. And these three, they always were. Plus, this show ran in a first-run syndication, so it had a lot more content freedom than any network horror show would allow them to have as a result. Some episodes were genuinely disturbing for a show that came out back then. Writer and director Tom McLaughlin and composer Fred Mullen had worked on the films as well as the series. So when they worked together on the episodes, you would feel this genuine sense of horror creep in. Did you know even David Cronenberg was roped into this show? Yeah, he was the one who directed Faith Healer. What I'm trying to say is there's a lot of talent involved behind the scenes, so it comes as no surprise that this show actually ranked second in the syndicated television ratings when it finished the first season. And that's a huge achievement for a show that had nothing to do with its own name. So if it worked for them, it was bound to work again, right? Well, that's what New Line Cinema thought when they saw the success of the show. So in 1988, they launched Freddy's Nightmares, which is a horror anthology show hosted by Freddy Krueger himself, with Robert Englund reprising his role. This show, however, would relate to the previous films and featured the same antagonist. So this version is what fans were expecting when they heard the recognizable brand name. However, luck was not on their side because Freddy's Nightmares is a largely forgotten show. The only people who are watching it today are the completionists. This show got a very poor critical reception, and that's frankly insane because you have Friday the 13th the series, in which theories should not work at all because of the mislabeling, yet it thrived. And it thrived so well despite all the lying. But despite all the success, when the second season ended, LeMay no longer wanted to be a part of the show. He made his two-parter, The Prophecies, and took his exit. And LeMay's final appearance was directed by Tom McLaughlin. This loss of co-lead is a big deal for a show that was heavily carried by the leads. So to work around it, LeMay was replaced by Ventura, a delinquent played by Steve Monarch, who first appeared in the second season episode titled Wedding Bell Blues. The third season started to push into darker and more ambitious territory with the new third wheel, and everyone hoped things would work out. But surprise, it didn't. The tonal inconsistencies that ran throughout all three seasons were never really resolved. Some episodes were really haunting, while others were camping. But because we still had our original trio together, it was all good. We still had an attachment. But with Ryan gone, the flaws in side characters became even more obvious. And then the show ended abruptly. No fanfare, no finished story, no nothing. The story got dropped after 72 episodes on May 26, 1990. Out of the 25 episodes commissioned for the third season, only 20 aired. And fans who had been following the show religiously had a lot of questions. Turns out the show was canceled for quite a few reasons. Partly due to the negative feedback of being associated with the movie franchise, and partly due to the pressure from religious groups and parent organizations who targeted the horror anthology for its devil imagery and violence. Well, technically, most people use the latter as the main reason. And under the pressure, Mancuso Jr.'s parent company buckled. The show didn't even have proper backing to begin with. It was always a bit of a gamble. So when this kind of external pressure showed up, Paramount washed its hands of it. Paramount eventually sold the rights of the franchise to New Line Cinema, and the TV series ended up becoming an orphan that no one wanted to claim. But that doesn't mean that in the short run, this show has not inspired iconic horror shows. You have Supernatural, Warehouse 13, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer to a degree, all of which are super popular, super well loved, and definitely follow the same trope of two people on a mission hunting something different every week. And I kind of hate how this show never got the love it should have. It now has a lot of attention, and the cult following it has now is very protective of the show, and rightfully so. If you think about it, this show never ran out of ideas because the premise itself is something that has no limits. You can always come up with new and cursed antiques that run on human desire and consequences. If only the show had gotten the love it deserved back then, and then maybe we would have gotten more than just 3 seasons. I believe that this show is one of those 80s shows that would do fantastic if it were revamped now. I, for one, would be there religiously streaming the show if it were made. What about you? Would you watch the show if it were made? Let me know in the comments what you guys think of this series, if you grew up watching it like me, and if you want this format to come back. And I'll see you guys next time. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this video with your horror fans, and I'll see you next time. And as always, stay marvelous.